Hello gang, well it's that time of the year again, and whether you're celebrating Christmas or Hanukkah, nothing says feast like a prime rib roast. What we've got here today is a 21.5 pound USDA choice prime rib roast. Now we're going to start off, we've got a thin layer of fat on the top up here, and underneath of it is just silver skin, which is basically gristle. So we're just going to pull that back. You find that it comes back really easy. And there's a seam there where the two muscles meet. Once we get to that seam, we're going to stop pulling that off. We're going to leave that fat on the bottom muscle, and we're just going to trim this off on the top. Alright, now we're going to stand our roast up, and what we want to do is separate our ribs from our roast. So we're going to take our boning knife, and we're going to go in about 3 inches deep, stay right up against the bones. You want to leave as much meat on that roast as possible. You don't want to have meat on those bones if you can help it. Now once we've gone all the way down the rack, we've kind of separated that rack of ribs from that meat. We can just push that back with our hand, and keeping that boning knife up against those ribs, we're going to go ahead and just trim all the way down to the bottom. Be real careful here. This is a lot easier to do than it looks. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to get it just fine. Now once we got to the bottom, just going to go ahead and trim that rack of ribs right off of that meat. Now we're going to lay the roast down, and we're going to take those ribs and lay them right back on top of it. And what we want to do is tie those to this roast. Those ribs will protect our meat, and it'll also add a lot of flavor to it. So we've put a slip knot into some butcher's twine, put it between the first two ribs and around the roast, snug that up. Now we're going to wrap it around the gap between the ribs, all the way around the meat, hook it under, pull it across. I'm sure you've all done this at some time in the past. It's pretty easy to do. Doesn't matter how many times you do it, as long as you keep those ribs up against that meat. That's the only purpose for this. We're not trying to get fancy here or impress anybody. We just want to keep our ribs on our meat. Once you get to the end, go ahead and tie that off, cut off the excess, and we'll be ready to go. Now we're cooking this outside today because I've got about 25 people coming over for dinner. So I'm also doing a 22 pound turkey and a 20 pound ham. So the kitchen's going to be a little busy. Okay, now we got our roast all ready. Time for our next step. Today we're going to take some regular old yellow mustard. And there's a number of things you can use for this. I'm just using this because it's handy and it's in a squeeze bottle. Now don't worry about the flavor for this, because the flavor is not going to go into the meat. This is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to act as a kind of glue, so we can put our rock salt onto this meat and have it stick to it. Now if there's anything else you'd rather use, if you want to use mayonnaise, or if you've got some other kind of pasty solution that you can put on here, go right ahead. The idea is we just want to stick the rock salt to the meat. Once again, there's not going to be any mustard flavor in this meat. Now we've got a tray of rock salt here. This is not coarse kosher salt. This is rock salt. Now when you buy this, you can go to the store, you can get a bag of it for about $5 for a 20 pound bag. It also comes in handy in the summer if you're serving oysters. You can sit them on a bed of rock salt and it keeps them nice and level. And what we want to do is just go ahead and coat the outside of this meat with this rock salt as best as we can. Time for our grill. Now we preheated our grill. We put it on its highest setting we've got this one up to about 425 degrees because it's 36 degrees outside. And what we're going to do is we're going to cook this meat for 15 minutes at that 425 degrees, and then we're going to turn our heat setting down to 325 degrees. Okay, now we've taken our meat thermometer probe from our Char-Griller remote thermometer here, and we've pushed it into the end of that roast as far as we can. And we're looking for an internal temperature of 125 to 130 degrees. That's where I like to have my prime rib roasts. Now we've cooked that, we've hit 126 internal, time to pull it. And look at that beautiful roast. I'm going to take that inside. You got it on a tray, and you want to use these heat-proof gloves because that salt is really hot. And we're going to go ahead and brush all that salt off of that meat. Now what this does is that salt is a mineral. It absorbs the heat, and it puts a nice crust on the outside of that meat and sears it for you. This is the same way the Brazilians cook their meat. Gives it an awesome flavor, doesn't make it salty, just tastes delicious, believe me. Now once we've brushed all that off of there, we're going to transfer this over to a cutting board. We've removed our string and untied our ribs from it, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this nice and tight in heavy aluminum foil, and we're going to let this meat rest for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. This is a big chunk of meat. Don't forget, this thing started out at 21.5 pounds, so we want to let it rest. Okay, the meat's rested. We've cut it into 1/2-inch thick slices for our guests, and there you have it. Beautiful prime rib. Enjoy.